I guess I know you kind of, you're in your intro, you talked about, it's Grigulevich, right? I mean, is that how you pronounce it?
Joseph Grigulevich. That's how it's correct. Joseph Grigulevich.
Joseph. I mean, and you kind of went over this in the introduction about, you know, how he was formed on behalf of Stalin's espionage network. I guess it's the NKVD. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but just an overview on some of the, you know, obviously there's some things that are, I guess, romantic, so to speak, like his involvement with the Trotsky first assassination attempt. And if you could kind of just review that, and maybe there's some other things maybe that you, in your intro, you didn't include. And I've read about this before I even read your article. I mean, I read up on this out of interest, but if you could just do a quick overview of that, and then I kind of want to go into the other things that you really wrote about.
But the people like Grigulevich, they were attracted by this internationalist message of communism, okay? And it gave them this identity, and as soon as they joined, it became like their fellowship, almost like a religion. See? Because for some of these people like Grigulevich, who grew up in this traditional Jewish families, they wanted to break away from the world of their communities, you know. So that secular communism also became like an identity for them. Okay.
Right.
But as soon as they joined the movement, and when the movement started to degenerate under Stalin, you know, there was no way out for them. You know?
At that point, right.
Okay. Some of them tried, like for instance, there were actually people who were colleagues of Grigulevich, who became disgusted with Stalin, disgusted with his national Bolshevism.
Right.
Because Stalin at some point, he tried to exonerate Russian nationalism.
Right.
Okay. So especially when he signed the peace with Hitler. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So they became very much disgusted, and they tried to break away. But Stalin created a special assassination crew, you know, that hunted these people and killed them. Okay. So one person was killed in 1937, literally machine gunned in Lausanne, Switzerland, you know. Another one was killed in New York hotel. It's still a mysterious suicide. Yeah, it's Walter Krivitsky, and nobody knows.
Right. Right.
Was it really suicide, or it was really something that was made up by this Stalin's gang, you know, that tried to execute him? Because and Grigulevich, on the one hand, he was committed to the cause, you know, but on the other hand, he had this deep fear that if he quits the cause, you know, something might happen. So it was commitment, blind commitment, but on the other hand, doubt, especially when he participated in all these executions. Yeah, it's like you know, when you're part, I hate to say it, but you can compare with a gang, you know. If you smear yourself with blood, you know, there is no way out. If you're part of this corporation.
But I guess in a way he did it for survival.
For survival. For survival.
In that regime.
Yeah, but it's interesting thing because by saying that he was part of this Jewish community that became interested in communist and socialist cause, I have to make like a correction, because he was not exactly part of the mainstream Jewry. He was, remember, I write in my article that he was the member of Karaites. Karaites, it was a tiny group of Jews who lived in Crimean Peninsula originally. It's, you know, Crimea.
Yes.
And they actually speak a Turkish language.
That was interesting. Yeah, that's interesting.
Turkic-speaking language, because they were hanging around Crimean Tatars. So they observed a lot of language from them, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't believe in Talmud. They believe in Old Testament, okay?
Right.
In the Polish kings brought Karaites and used them as scribes, accountants, and bodyguards, you know?
Right.
And they were highly educated people. That's very important, you know?
Yeah, you meant, right. I think you
So
emphasized that. Mhm.
it's amazing, you know, to the end of his life, he was literally a bookish person.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's what made him into an academic, you know?
Right.
But for me, as a historian, I became interested in his in this character because for me, he's like an example of this thousands of people who are hooked on this message of Communist International,
Yeah.
early communism, the romanticism, the Spanish Civil War. You know, it's another big deal, you know, for people.
Like, see, and that was my question. Is like it seemed like the Spanish Civil War was like not a lab, but like or testing ground, but between those ideologies of fascism and then, you know, whether it be communism. And it was interesting because you read like some authors who I really like George Orwell or Hemingway, who participated, and they were more left-leaning,
Yeah.
I guess, socialist writers, but I just like their style. I mean, of writing and just kind of the way they express themselves. But it was interesting. It just seemed like the Spanish Civil War just was very dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess with anything, when there's a lot of different types of ideologies involved, it's complicated, I guess.
Complicated.
But
yeah, I would like to say a few words about it.
Sure.
Look, he was recruited during the Spanish Civil War. It was the war that brought him into the Soviet brothers, okay?
Right.
Because he was recruited by this guy, Orlov.
Yes.
He was romantically driven to go to Spain in defiance of his communist movement in Argentina. So he goes to Spain because he wants a young man who wants to join the cause, you know, this Republican cause against this fascists, you know, and that's where he was captured in this net, you know.
Right.
But the Spanish Civil War, it's interesting story because look, at that time it was like again, it can be compared to like with Cuba, for instance, in 1960s, you know,
right,
or with Vietnam, where the bunch of people who were on the left, you know, they were romantically involved in with this causes, trying to go there to help, you know, to cut the sugar cane in Cuba, or to go to Vietnam, you know, to express their solidarity, you know, this type of stuff.
Right.
So the Spain at that time for this, for old leftists, Spain was very important, you know. But interesting thing, what they didn't talk at that time in 1930s, and that's what George Orwell exposed at that time. The Stalin secret police was running wild there, you know, penalizing people who disagreed with Stalin.
It's almost like they were calling the shots, really.
Yeah, exactly. They were calling shots. You're absolutely right. But people on the left were not supposed to talk about it at that time. You know? And that is why when George Orwell, interesting, he was to the end of his life was a person on the left. You know, some people might not know about it.
Right.
But he tried to write about in his book a homage to Catalonia, and he was denounced as a traitor. You know.
Right.
Because it was not politically correct to talk bad about Stalin and the Union. Can you imagine?
Well, and he had a long reach, Stalin. I mean, really, he seems like, you know, I mean, obviously he didn't have to be in Soviet Union to kind of be, you know, the threat was, I guess, everywhere. If you spoke out against him, it sounds like if you were, you know, a communist.
Yeah, he positioned himself, Stalin, as a defense the forces of goodness, you know. So that is why no matter what he did, you know, times he committed, it didn't matter, you know, because since he was considered on the side of angels, you know, so that is why Stalin was exonerated. And by the way, Grigulevich was participant in creating this lie, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to write about in my article, because he was actually instructed by his controller to make up this book of memoirs, supposedly written by a German member of this international brigades,
Right.
A fake book, to what? To smear with dirt leftist Trotskyites,
Right.
He belonged to Trotskyite movement, and in fact, he was participant in this orgy of killing of the anarchists and Trotskyites in Barcelona. It was a horrible. When I was reading about it, I was like you. I didn't know about this, but when I was reading about it, I was horrified how this Stalinist left, who called the shots, they literally attacked and executed anarchists and Trotskyites in Barcelona. It's again, you were not supposed to talk about it at this time. It's only late in 1950s. It became known. It was just mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's fascinating. But and going back to him, I mean, obviously, and then he had that life, and I guess his last thing that he did before Stalin was the whole Tito. Maybe he was going to be involved in that, or I guess they selected him, or I'm not sure the story. But and then Stalin died, and obviously that was the kind of the demise of his international,
adventure,
as far as his international career. Grigulevich, and then and then he just kind of settled to a life as you wrote as an author. But so. But kind of going back to him, is you're saying he was an internationalist, but he still had that, coming from the Jewish community, he had that. He just seemed like it was kind of dynamic or complex as a person, like what he believed, what he. I guess that's kind of what I gathered. I mean, trying to get a read on his personality and who he was. Just seemed like there were so many facets to him.
In fact, multiple personalities, that's what became his personality. Because when I briefly met him a few times, so again, like all spies, he was able to learn. In fact, like present president of Russia, who is a typical representative of this group, So when you talk with these people, they quickly grasp what you want to hear, And they try to cater to you, to grasp you on some kind of unconscious level, what you feel, Then they already have intellectual props, how to build bridges with you, like cliches, It becomes part of the nature, So they use cliches, like for instance, you're a sports writer, okay? So I'm sure if you met Grigulevich, he would be able to strike and keep conversation with you like for a couple of days, about
exactly. I guess it's kind of like a con game. I mean, they get your trust, but it's a form of manipulation.
It
seems to me. And with Putin, that's what I say. Anyway.
Something like the best analogy would be people who are in sales. For instance, if you sell the houses or some kind of condos, you create this smoke screen, you create this environment, you invite people in some kind of lake resort area, especially sell the big properties, you show them catalogs, you take them to the boat rides, and so you put them in this cushion, and eventually you force them to buy something, or car sales. So that's what
car sales. Well, it's sales, it's propaganda. I mean, it's it's interesting though. I mean, well, politics is basically that.
Yes, it's another good analogy.
But so what about his family? I mean, he was married, he had kids, and kind of how did they fit into his life? I was just curious about that. What you know about that?
Well, I didn't met his family, okay? I only read a lot about his family,
Yes.
So, but he was married to a Spanish communist, okay? It was, in fact, the most, I guess, romance with blood, I call it. You know, there was a movie, remember the old movie, Romance with Stone, you know. So at least in his case, Grigulevich case, we can call his courtship Romance with Blood, because he was courted this lady who belonged to the Mexican Communist League. He was courting her during the preparation to assassinate Trotsky. Okay. Right. It was 1939, 1940. And in fact, she provided a safe escape for him. She provided a safe house, and he was hiding. He was staying with her. So it was there was a lot of romanticism about the game of hide and seek. And obviously she was fascinated with this game, you know, so especially being on the side of angels, and plus an exciting game of hide and seek, you know. So she falls in love with him, and at some point when, in fact, the first attempt to assassinate Trotsky, to hide for a while, to lay low for a while, she was hiding him in the mental hospital. She brought him food, clothing, you know, like makeup and all these things. So and eventually they fall in love, and then he crosses the Mexican border, goes to the States. She follows him for a while. They stay in New York, and then he comes back. He crosses the Texas border.
Yeah, that's what you said,
yeah, and goes back to do the second attempt, which was second attempt on Trotsky's life, you know, which succeeded.
Right.
So he marries this woman, and eventually, when they successfully killed Trotsky together, it's a big group of people. You know, he was only part of this group. He was sent to Argentina, where he stayed for the entire duration of the war.
Right.
And then after the war, he was brought in 1948 back to Moscow to be vetted, to be tried and checked. Was he infested with this bourgeois spirit, capitalist spirit, or he still belonged to the movement? You know, so they watched him. Obviously, they bugged his apartment to see what kind of talks he does. You know, to see, you know, if he had these heretical notions, and he was tried. Actually, his wife, this Mexican wife, she was kept in Moscow, and he was asked to do some work in the West for a while to see, you know, if he comes back or not, you know, to try him.
All right.
So he goes back, and then that's when he was trusted very much, you know. So he was sent to become this ambassador to the Vatican City. Okay.
Oh, that's right.
And that's when his daughter was born, you know. So he was recalled. He was recalled back to Moscow in his prime, you know, when he was in his prime. So he was ready to kind of go on his suicidal mission to kill Joseph Broz Tito. When he already had the young infant daughter, okay, and a wife, you know. So because he was part of the cause, like a red Jesuit, basically. That's how it can be called, is red Jesuit. That's how I describe him.
Huh.
Okay,
that's interesting.
That's I cannot find I was looking for the best metaphor analogy, you know, and that's what it was. This Soviet secret police organization, this international espionage apparatus, you know. So the red Jesuits. So they made commitment to do whatever.
Red Jesuit.
Red Jesuit. Okay.
Interesting.
And at the last moment, everything was terminated, and he was recalled back to Moscow with his infant daughter. He dropped his library. He left his library. He had a huge library in Italy. So he dropped everything, and the only thing, they had this basket where they put the infant baby and the wife, and they were abruptly brought to Moscow in 1948. Oh, I'm sorry, 1953. 1953.
Right.
And that's when his demise and the rise started immediately. You know, demise as a spy. And that's what a lot of people who were spies before, they couldn't cope with the Soviet reality, because it was like cage, you know. Of course, for them it was a golden cage, you know. So you were not allowed to speak up, but you were provided everything, you know. So you could enjoy all the perks, everything, you know. But you couldn't speak up, you couldn't travel, and a lot of people couldn't live with this, you know. But he was able to kind of reinvent himself because he was this bookish person from his early age. He was the person of the book, and he was dreaming about becoming either an actor or a writer. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to use my secret police aura, you know, because people in the Soviet Union were so intimidated by this omnipotent power of the secret police, you know. If you made a hit somewhere, and if I come, for instance, to your editorial board somewhere, the publishing house, to your paper, and said, 'Hey, in there somewhere, I have this connections.' Oh my goodness, you know, he does have connections. So let's butter his butt. You know, that's how people think. You know, so the people were kind of afraid and respectful of these people because they were people of power. You know. Even those who were retired, you know, and the smart people, they had these anecdotes, they had stories, you know, here and there, spreading around friends to create the image. So, like, they have connections with this mysterious Soviet secret police, you know. So it was part of the game. And if you could use these stories, you know, successfully, oh my goodness, you could prosper in the Soviet society, you know. The secret aura of the secret police, because everybody was intimidated, you know. So you knew how play this game. So he played this game to make inroads in the world of publishing houses, and the world of newspapers, and the world of radio. Occasionally he was asked to go on radio in the Soviet Union to kind of do these shows on Latin America, Cuba. But he didn't allow people to make pictures of himself for some reason. You know, that's what people told me in Moscow. Yeah, he was petrified when somebody tried to make a picture of him. And one person during some kind of conference, history conference, she made a pencil sketch of him, and he didn't see it at first. But then she approached him and she said, "Look, Joseph, I made a really good sketch of you." And he became literally mad and petrified. You know. He grabbed this sketch and just tore it apart.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So
I guess, well, I guess he's still being cautious. I mean, I think I'm not saying a sense of paranoia, but it sounded like from what you wrote, there was always a sense of, as you said, like, you know, being watched or being monitored constantly, like testing his loyalty. And could you talk about, like, okay, after Stalin died, that transition, the changing of the guard, and why, like, people like Grigulevich, you know, who was, I guess, you know, loyal to, like, was a spy under basically under Stalin, why now all of a sudden he was out of favor? Was it just a mistrust of people who were connected to Stalin? Was that, and he just wanted to change everything?
Because there was under Stalin, they created the special group of assassins, you know, within the secret police. Within the Red Jesuits, they had a special group. It was called the Special Tasks Group. So they were traveling around and killing people. So Grigulevich was part of this group. And when Stalin died, so his successors who were struggling for power, they realized that they needed to denounce the boss in order to boost their own image, you know. And since the people like Grigulevich, they were the closest to this Stalinism, to kind of, they were involved into these crimes, you know, of Stalinism. So they were not exactly good, you know. But at the same time, some of them were put in prison, especially officers who were controllers. Grigulevich controllers, they were put in prison for 15 years. Okay, not all of them, but 500 officers. After Stalin died, especially when Khrushchev denounced Stalin in 1956, some of them were put in prison for 10, 15 years. Of course, it was not brutal treatment. It was like house arrest type.
Yeah, right,
So
right.
they were not in some kind of cells, But still,
Yeah.
the message was there. People like Grigulevich, they were out of favor. So we are not
Yes.
going like. So all these agents, there were hundreds of them, like people like Grigulevich. There were hundreds of them.
Mm-hmm.
So they were recalled from the West, and they were either given some kind of small retirement benefits or some petty jobs, or they said, okay, go ahead and land the job, and we will make a call on your behalf if you really need. That's what probably he did. He found some job in Latin American Studies Institute, and they probably called on his behalf. Like making a hint, that please give him a job, and that's how he started.
I see. Right, and I know you did write about all that in the article, just kind of how he became that author writer, and especially on I guess a so-called expert on Catholicism, I guess, or
that number one in 1970s, number one expert on Latin American Catholicism. And I remember all people who wanted to defend PhDs, they tried to kind of visit him, to smile at him, to kind of to make a contact with him, So, and it was obvious, people tried to befriend him because he was the person of power. Okay. At least in the academic world at that time, academic powerful person, academic world with this mysterious past, that's how he presented himself.
I guess he liked to present, that mysterious past made him seem romantic or interesting, or give him an image, and sounded like he was the type to play up his past or his connections, or I guess there was an ego. I guess he
big ego, yeah. And especially when I talked with him, I felt this big ego. And what
really?
It was obvious, the way he talked, the questions he asked, but it's indirectly. At the same time, he had big ego, but at the same time, he made the person feel comfortable, When I was talking to him, I felt very comfortable. But let's go back to this his life after he came back.
Yeah.
So, what I noticed that not many people who wrote about Soviet espionage, about the life when these agents came back, they didn't write too much about how they remade themselves in the Soviet Union. And normally, not many people pay attention to how they conversed with people around them, how they either remade themselves or killed themselves through alcohol abuse. There were a bunch of people like this. Right. They couldn't see the way out, like this guy, one of the Cambridge Fives. You probably heard, Guy Burgess, who literally...
Right.
Yeah, he killed himself through alcohol abuse.
Right.
Not opposite example. A person who could not reinvent himself, who felt very uncomfortable. And he was destroying himself, through this cheap alcohol provided by the secret police.
Right. Slow death. I mean.
Yeah.
That's irony there with Burgess. Just that whole story, but it's a whole nother story. But it kind of ties into what you're saying. These spies who came in from they brought them in, and then they lived this. It seemed like a lot of them like a very unhappy life after that, or just
and I don't know what it is. I guess it's personality, because look, like Grigulevich, Guy Burgess was offered actually a lot. He was offered more perks. He was offered a luxurious apartment. He literally had servants. Grigulevich was cast aside because he was part of this assassination crew that was very uncomfortable for the Soviets to
right.
And the person, so again, being morally appalled with Grigulevich, you should give him a credit. He used everything, to make himself up, to recreate himself. But Guy Burgess didn't use anything. He literally provided the teaching job by the secret police to teach English language, and he couldn't keep the job. He got drunk and he didn't show up for the job. It's amazing how different people handle this differently.
Right. You're right. I mean, I guess he gave up, I guess, in a sense. But
what is sad, I think if in the beginning when he was young, if he graduated, see, he went to Sorbonne, Grigulevich, in 1934. He went in Paris. He went to Sorbonne for 1 year. He was doing some studies in anthropology, social sciences, and if circumstances had been different, if it hadn't been for Spanish War, his commitment to communist cause, he would have become a great academic, like an anthropologist. Much earlier, he did become an anthropologist, but later.
Interesting.
He could become a psychologist, a historian. But see, his life went a different way. But still, at the end of his life, he fulfilled part of his dream. I think that somewhere deep inside, he felt that it was not his game. And even a person who was put in the most unfavorable circumstances, when he literally was pushed by circumstances to be part of this course, who was locked in this world, finally was able kind of to untangle circumstances and recreate himself. So I kind of, I always want to, I don't want to give them benefit of the doubt. I just want to explore them, as not to simply denounce them, like, oh, he's a horrible man. Of course, he was a killer. Ultimately, he was a participant in these killings, but at the same time, is why people became this causes. This. See, there are a lot of other, like when we explore people like Grigulevich, we might find the answer to other uncomfortable topics. We are not ready to talk yet. That something might happen in 1930s in other countries,
Right.
You know what I mean?
I guess when I look at him, it's like, well, what can I take from this? But I don't know. There's a lot, because I think there's so much that you could. There was a lot of well, I don't know if it's contradiction's the right word, but as you said, he became an academic, so to speak, a writer, but he participated in killings prior to that. I mean, there was, I guess, some virtuous things in his life. There was obviously some not so virtuous aspects to his life, but I guess in the big picture, everybody is like, I mean, everybody's got things. Maybe his one.
Yeah, basically, we can say, yes, it was ultimately a strategy to survive. Okay.
True.
But the way it was not simply survival for the sake of survival. He wanted also to get some kind of intellectual satisfaction from this, So that is why he entered the academic world,
True. I mean,
of course, he was selfish, egotistical, and he tried. I write it in the study of how he exploited his spy craft, to get his academic credentials.
Yeah, right. So, that's an interesting story. It really is. Go ahead.
How do you? So, why did you get interested in this story? Just what intrigued you in the first place about?
I mean, I've always found like history, especially political history, or and even I have a strong interest in international relations and affairs. I've always had those interests, and so whether it be if I'm reading about Spanish Civil War or early communism or Northern Ireland or so many things interest me that it's like and I've read up a lot about. I think maybe what sparked my interest in what caught when I saw that this article, because I had done some research on Trotsky in Mexico and
great,
just about and so it kind of tied in not too long ago, and so it was kind of fresh, and then I saw this article. But I mean, these things fascinate me. I mean,
did you read this book? That's one of the recent books about Trotsky assassination. It's like a fictional book.
No, I haven't. What book is that?
The Man Who Loved Dogs. It's a novel by Cuban writer Leonardo Padura. A really interesting novel based on real facts. Just for you as a creative writer, you might be interested in.
Yeah, no, for sure, definitely. I'll have to check that one out. Yeah, I mean, so I mean, these things just fascinate me, and so anyway, and that's what caught my interest, or piqued my interest was just the subject matter, of course, and about your background, Andre. Kind of go. I know we started talking about me, but I do want to get that in there. Kind of ask you kind of about your background and how you got to the University of Memphis.
I'm a professor of history here, and I teach Russian history before 1917, after 1917, and I also teach from time to time history of religions.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And but my major course I teach is world civilizations. So I teach world civilizations.
Oh, wow.
Okay, that's what I do. But my major expertise, in fact, it's a history of religions.
Wow.
And that's how I became interested in Grigulevich, by the way. You might be surprised, but that's what brought me into it. I will explain to you why. Because by studying religions and coming from a former communist country, in the course of time, I became aware that communism and socialism, a soft version of communism, were the forms of religion. Okay, a secular religion, and that's what sparked my interest. I realized that the modern age, for many intellectuals, for many advanced people, well-read people, religion was dead. God is dead. Remember Nietzsche said, "God is dead," right? So, and in modern age, a lot of intellectuals were falling for socialism and communism simply because it was a form of surrogate religion, secular religion. Okay, and that's what I felt. That's what I felt Grigulevich did, because he fell in love with communism. And he converted to communism literally, because it was a scientific faith that gave him hope, like a dream about his golden future where everybody would be like brothers and sisters, So it was really literally a religion, So he converted to this religion and he became part of this movement, and he felt this camaraderie, fellowship. They were helping each other, especially being a young person,
Yeah, right. Well, I would imagine a lot of the younger people there got caught up in that, and especially if they had, if they were Jewish. And with whether it be the discrimination or the oppression or what have you.
Yeah, definitely. We have to keep in mind that it was romanticism that was conditioned, as I said before, by circumstances. Since anti-Semitism was so widespread. Remember, I told you that even those Jews who wanted to become, for instance, join some German courses, Polish courses, they were not accepted.
Right.
We were always told, you're not part of us, so you had to make a choice. Where do you go? See, it's toward this religion, but right?
Yeah, right. So I guess, he Judaism, didn't really inform his life. Because since he chose to embrace, the communism as his religion.
He chose to embrace communism, and plus his mother encouraged his bookish pursuits because it was part of the culture. So she did everything to give him the best education. So he went to a Polish gymnasium,